What if the real reason most people never achieve financial freedom isn't a lack of talent, effort, or opportunity, but mental clutter? Every unclear commitment drains your energy. Every distracted decision costs you money. And every day you live reactively, your future becomes more expensive. Most people don't fail because they're lazy. They fail because their mind is overloaded with unfinished decisions, vague priorities, and constant internal noise. This is not about working harder or longer. It's about clearing your mind, sharpening your focus, and building a system that allows you to make better decisions consistently. Because real wealth isn't created by hustle alone, it's created by clarity. And clarity is the foundation of true freedom. When I walk into a room like this, filled with capable, intelligent, ambitious people, I know something important before I say a single word. Every one of you already knows how to work hard. You wouldn't be here if you didn't. You already care. You already try. You already try. You already push. And yet, if I were to ask you privately, how many of you feel you could be operating with more clarity, more calm, more control? Almost every hand would go up. Not because you're failing, but because the world has changed faster than the way we think about work. Let me start with a simple truth I've learned after decades of coaching leaders, entrepreneurs, creatives, and executives. Stress is not caused by too much work. Stress is caused by unclear agreements with yourself. When your mind doesn't know what it has committed to, it keeps reminding you, constantly, inefficiently, and usually at the worst possible moment. Your brain becomes a bad office assistant, tapping you on the shoulder while you're driving, showering, trying to sleep, whispering a don't forget, don't forget, don't forget, don't forget. And because it never tells you what exactly to do next, it just creates pressure. Here's the good news. Your mind is brilliant at having ideas, but it is terrible at holding them. The moment you stop asking your mind to be a storage unit and start using it as a thinking tool, something remarkable happens. You feel lighter, you feel sharper, you feel free. You feel free. And freedom? Real freedom is not about having no responsibilities. Financial freedom, creative freedom, life freedom all begin with mental freedom. If your mind is cluttered, your decisions are expensive. If your mind is clear, your decisions compound. I often tell my clients, you don't get paid for the work you do. You get paid for the clarity you bring. Clarity creates leverage. Leverage creates results. Results, over time, create options. And options are the foundation of financial independence. This is not about productivity for productivity's sake. This is about building a life where your energy goes into what matters, not into remembering what you might be forgetting. Imagine for a moment what it would feel like to trust yourself completely. To know that nothing important is slipping through the cracks. To know that when you relax, you've earned it, not because everything is done, but because everything is handled. That state is not mythical. Athletes call it the zone. Martial artists call it a mind like water. I call it the natural state of a well-managed life. Water responds perfectly. You throw a pebble, it ripples exactly the right amount, then returns to stillness. It doesn't overreact. It doesn't underreact. That's how your mind is meant to work. But when your commitments are vague, your mind stays tense. And a tense mind is an expensive mind. It wastes time, it wastes money, it wastes opportunity. Here's a principle that quietly governs success. You can only do one thing at a time, but you can decide many things ahead of time. The people who win financially, professionally, personally, are not doing more in the moment. They are deciding better before the moment arrives. They are not heroic. They are prepared. Most people believe they need more discipline. They don't. They need more definition. A project that feels overwhelming is not overwhelming because it's big. It's overwhelming because the next action is undefined. You cannot do a project. You can only do an action. And when the action is clear, motivation follows naturally. Action is not the result of motivation. Motivation is the result of clarity. Let me share something that surprises people. The most successful individuals I've worked with are not driven by urgency. They are driven by perspective. They don't ask what's screaming the loudest. They ask what's the next intelligent move? That shift alone can add years of productive energy to your life. And energy, not time, is the real currency of wealth. Financial freedom is not built on hustle alone. Hustle without clarity burns out. Financial freedom is built on systems that let your mind rest. When your mind rests, it sees patterns. When it sees patterns, it makes better investments of time, money, and attention. Attention is your most valuable asset. Where you place it determines the direction of your life. I remind myself daily, if it has my attention, it deserves a decision. Not now, not someday, not maybe, just a decision. Is it actionable? Is it trash? Is it reference? Is it something I'll incubate for later? Decision creates closure. Closure creates calm. Calm creates power. And here's the paradox. The more you trust your external system, the more creative your internal world becomes. When you stop using your mind as a reminder system, it becomes a strategy engine. This is where breakthroughs come from. This is where businesses are born. This is where financial leaps happen, not in chaos, but in clarity. I've seen people double their income not by working more hours, but by reducing mental friction. When your attention is fragmented, every decision costs more. When your attention is focused, even small actions produce outsized returns. Success is rarely about effort, it's about alignment. So as we begin this journey together, I want you to release one old belief, that being busy means being valuable. Busyness is often just a sign of unprocessed commitments. Value comes from doing the right things at the right time with a clear mind, and that is a learnable skill. Let me leave you with this thought before we move forward. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. Build systems that honor your attention. Build systems that free your mind, and you will discover that getting things done is not about pushing harder. It's about thinking better. This is where real productivity begins. When people come to me and say, David, I just want to feel more in control, I usually smile. Because control is not something you grab, it's something you design. And the moment you design it, it shows up almost automatically. The problem is not that life is out of control. The problem is that most people are trying to control life with their minds alone, and the mind was never meant to do that job. Let me tell you something I've seen thousands of times. Someone sits across from me, intelligent, successful, well-intentioned, and I ask a simple question. Where do you keep track of everything you've committed to? They pause. They gesture vaguely. They say, oh, well, it's mostly in my head. And that's the moment I know exactly why they're tired. Your mind is not a container. It is a processor. When you use it as a container, it rabbles, it leaks, it interrupts you at inconvenient times, it whispers anxieties when you're trying to relax, it shouts when you're trying to focus. And the cost of that constant mental noise is enormous, not just emotionally, but financially. Because here's a truth most people never connect. A distracted mind makes expensive decisions. It misses opportunities. It reacts instead of choosing. It spends money to compensate for stress. Here's a principle I teach leaders and entrepreneurs alike. Well, your income is a lagging indicator of your clarity. When your actions are clear, your execution improves. When execution improves, value increases. When value increases, income eventually follows. But if you skip clarity, you end up working harder for less return. This is why hustle alone is a dangerous strategy. Hustle without clarity burns capital, mental, emotional, and financial. Clarity turns effort into leverage. Another important distinction, deciding does not mean committing forever. It means committing for now. Many people avoid decisions because they fear being trapped, but decisions are adjustable. What's costly is not making them. A defined next action is not a prison, it's a door. I often say you can renegotiate any agreement with yourself once you know what it is. Most stress comes not from too much to do, but from agreements you forgot you made. When you surface those agreements and decide on actions, you regain authority over your time and energy. This authority is essential for financial freedom because wealth is not built in crisis mode. Wealth is built in deliberate mode. The people who create lasting success are not reacting all day. They are choosing, and choosing requires space. Space requires closure, requires decisions. One of the most powerful shifts people experience when they adopt this way of working is this. They stop asking, what should I do? And start asking, what can I do right now in this context with the energy I have? That question alone eliminates guilt. It replaces pressure with practicality. And practicality is incredibly effective. Your best work does not come from forcing yourself. It comes from aligning your actions with your current reality. When actions are clearly defined and appropriately chosen, work becomes lighter, faster, and surprisingly more enjoyable. Let me leave you with this thought as we move forward. A clarity is kindness to your future self. Every decision you make today is a gift to the person you'll be tomorrow. And the more of those gifts you give, the more freedom you create. In the next part, we'll explore organization review and why consistency, not intensity, is the real engine of long-term success and financial independence. Once you've decided what something means and what the next action is, there's a subtle but critical question that follows. Where does it live now? Because clarity without placement fades, insight without structure evaporates, and motivation without a system always asks too much of your willpower. I've learned over the years that most people don't have a motivation problem. They have a placement problem. They know what to do, but they don't know where to put it so it shows up at the right time. And when the reminder doesn't show up when it's needed, trust erodes. When trust erodes, the mind steps back in and the noise returns. Organization is not about filing things neatly. It's about putting reminders where your intuition can find them when action is possible. That's it. No more, no less. When you organize correctly, you stop managing your work and start navigating it. Here's a principle I live by. Your system should think for you, so you don't have to think about your system. The moment your organization becomes complicated, you stop using it. And the moment you stop using it, your mind takes over again. Simple systems win not because they're elegant, but because they're trustworthy. I've seen people with brilliant minds sabotaged by messy systems, and people with average talent outperform everyone because their systems were clean. Talent is important, but reliability compounds faster. And compounding, whether in finance or productivity, is the quiet engine of freedom. Think about how many times you've reviewed the same list, the same email, the same idea without taking action. That repetition is not discipline, it's leakage. A well-organized system ensures that when you see something, you're either ready to act on it or you're not seeing it at all. That distinction alone saves enormous energy. This is why separation matters. Projects are not actions. Actions are not reference. Someday ideas are not commitments. When everything lives in the same place, your brain has to resort it every time you look. And resorting is expensive. Organization removes friction so execution can be effortless. But organization alone is not enough. Systems decay. Life changes. Priorities shift. That's why review is the keystone habit. Without regular review, even the best system becomes noise. I tell people this often. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your reviews. Review is how you reclaim perspective. Review is how you remind yourself what matters. Review is how you prevent drift. There is something deeply grounding about a weekly moment where you step back and say, this is my world. This is what I've committed to. This is what's moving. This is what can wait. That moment restores authority. And authority over your commitments is the foundation of calm power. Financially successful people do this instinctively. They review accounts. They review investments. They review assumptions. They don't do it because something is wrong. They do it so nothing goes wrong unnoticed. The same principle applies to your work in life. Review is not reactive. Review is preventative. What I've noticed is that people who review consistently stop being surprised by their own lives. They see problems early when they're small and solvable. They notice opportunities before they're obvious to everyone else, and they adjust course without drama. This is where consistency quietly outperforms intensity. Anyone can work hard for a week. Anyone can push through a deadline. But people who build extraordinary lives do small, regular acts of alignment. They check in. They recalibrate. They keep their agreements current. Here's an important realization. A clear system gives you permission to rest. When you know that everything is captured, organized, and reviewed, relaxation becomes guilt-free. And guilt-free rest restores creativity. Creativity creates value. Value creates wealth. Burnout is rarely caused by too much work. It's caused by too little clarity about what work actually matters. When you review regularly, you stop carrying yesterday's priorities into today. You work with the present, not against it. Let me offer you a quiet but powerful truth. What you review, you respect. If you don't review your commitments, your goals, your projects, they slowly lose credibility with your own mind. But when you review them, even briefly, they regain weight. They feel real again, and real things get done. Over time, this rhythm, decide, organize, review, creates a life that feels intentional instead of reactive. You stop living at the mercy of urgency. You start choosing based on values, and values-driven choices are the only ones that sustain long-term success. As we move forward, understand this. Freedom is not the absence of structure. Freedom is the presence of the right structure, the kind that disappears when you're doing your best work. In the next part, we'll talk about doing, how to choose what to work on in the moment, how to trust your intuition without chaos, and how this final piece turns clarity into real-world results. Once your world is captured, clarified, organized, and regularly reviewed, something remarkable happens. The question of what should I be doing right now begins to disappear, not because the work is finished, but because the answer becomes obvious. And when the answer is obvious, action becomes natural. This is where many people expect rigid rules. They want a formula, a priority code, a hierarchy that tells them what to do at every moment. But life doesn't work that way. Work doesn't work that way. And freedom certainly doesn't work that way. The truth is, you already know how to choose what to do. The problem has never been choice, it's been trust. When your system is incomplete, you don't trust your intuition, so you second guess it. When your system is complete, intuition becomes reliable again. I often say you don't need more discipline. You need fewer things pulling at you. When distractions are removed, choice becomes simple. You look at your options, your energy, your time, and your context, and the right action rises to the surface. Think about how you naturally decide what to eat when you're not stressed. You don't analyze every nutritional variable. You notice hunger, preference, availability. You choose. For fidelity, you choose. Work is no different when your system is clean. The complexity fades. The signal becomes clear. This is why doing is the reward for all the earlier work. Doing is not about forcing productivity. It's about allowing momentum. And momentum, once it starts, is one of the most powerful forces in both success and wealth creation. People who build financial independence are not constantly grinding. They are constantly moving. They choose actions that fit the moment instead of fighting the moment. And over time, those small, well-chosen actions accumulate into something extraordinary. Here's a principle I share often. When everything is equally important, you freeze. When everything is visible, you flow. Visibility creates movement. Movement creates progress. Progress builds confidence. Confidence allows you to play a longer game, and playing the long game is essential. Short-term urgency pays bills. Long-term clarity builds freedom. I've noticed something fascinating about people who truly trust their systems. They work intensely when it's time to work, and they rest deeply when it's time to rest. There's no half working, half guilting, half worrying. Presence returns, and presence improves everything, from the quality of your work to the quality of your relationships. This is where lifestyle and productivity merge. When you're fully present with your work improves. When you're fully present with your family, your life feels richer. And richness is not just a financial concept. It's an experiential one. Let me offer you a quiet metric for success. How quickly can you re-engage with what matters? Not how busy you are, not how full your calendar is, but how fast you can come back to focus after an interruption. Clean systems shorten that recovery time dramatically. The world will always interrupt you. That's not the problem. The problem is staying interrupted. So, when your next actions are clear and organized, re-entry becomes effortless. You don't waste energy figuring out where you left off. You simply continue. This is also where confidence in decision-making grows. When you know you're acting from a place of clarity, you stop fearing mistakes. You adjust faster, you learn quicker, and adaptability more than perfection is what keeps people financially resilient. I remind entrepreneurs of this often. You don't need to get it right. You need to get it moving. Movement creates feedback. Feedback creates refinement. Refinement creates value. And value sustained over time creates freedom. As you live and work this way, something subtle but profound shifts. You stop feeling chased by your commitments. You start feeling supported by them. Your system becomes a partner, not a taskmaster. And when that happens, work stops being heavy. Let me leave you with this thought before we conclude. Our best work emerges when you trust yourself enough to act without hesitation. That trust is not blind. It is built one captured thought, one clarified action, one reviewed system at a time. In the final part, we'll bring everything together: purpose, perspective, and how this way of living becomes not just a productivity method, but a philosophy for a calm, wealthy, and meaningful life. As we come to the end of this conversation, I want to step back with you, not away from the work, but above it. Because productivity, when done correctly, is not about doing more. It's about being more available to what truly matters. What we've really been talking about all along is trust. Trust in your system, trust in your choices, trust in yourself. When that trust is present, life feels lighter, not because there's less to do, but because you're no longer carrying it all in your head. And when your head is clear, your heart has room, your vision expands, your decisions improve. I've seen this method change lives not because it makes people efficient, but because it makes them present. Present with their work, present with their families, present with their opportunities. And presence is the foundation of every meaningful form of wealth. Here's something I want you to remember long after today. You don't need to simplify your life. You need to simplify how you relate to it. Life will always be complex. Ambitious people don't want less responsibility. They want the capacity to handle more without losing themselves. That capacity is built through clarity. Financial freedom at its core is not about money. Money is just a symbol. Financial freedom is about choice. It's about being able to decide where your attention goes, how your energy is used, and what kind of future you're building. And those choices are shaped long before the money shows up by the habits you practice when no one is watching. People who live this way stop chasing balance and start living in alignment. They know when to push and when to pause. They don't confuse urgency with importance. They understand that saying no is often the most profitable decision they can make. I often remind myself, the quality of your life is determined by the quality of your questions. When your system is clear, you start asking better questions. Not a what do I have to do, but a what am I choosing to do? Not a how do I survive this week, but a what kind of life am I designing? And here's the quiet miracle of it all. When you operate from this place, success stops feeling heavy. Work becomes an expression of values instead of a reaction to pressure. You stop proving your worth through busyness and start creating value through focus. Over time, this way of working reshapes your identity. You no longer see yourself as someone trying to keep up. You become someone who sets the pace, and people notice. Opportunities come not because you're louder, but because you're clearer. Let me offer you one final principle, one I've lived by for decades. You can have anything you want, but not everything you want, unless you're clear about what matters. Clarity is what turns desire into direction. Direction turns effort into progress. Progress sustained becomes freedom. This is not a system you finish. It's a practice you return to. Life will change. Your goals will evolve. Your responsibilities will grow, but the fundamentals remain. Capture what has your attention. Decide what it means. Organize it where it belongs. Review it with honesty. Do what makes sense now. If you do that consistently, something extraordinary happens. Your work supports your life instead of consuming it. Your success feels earned, not exhausting. And your future feels open instead of overwhelming. I'll leave you with this thought, the one that guides me more than any other. You are never behind. You are exactly where your clarity has brought you. And the moment you choose clarity, you change the direction of everything that follows. Thank you for giving me your attention. Take care of it. It's the most valuable asset you own.